as a brief introduction to our panel, first of all, thank you for joining us today. As we know, these are important times that we are muddling through, and not only do we have unprecedented changes that we are all trying to figure out in the world's biggest economy, which is the United States. There are major fault lines developing around the world. We had not expected even 5 years ago that there'll be two major wars tearing over the peace in the Middle East and in Russia-Ukraine area. We didn't know there'll be some pretty serious antagonisms developing between the U.S. and China. We are, to many expert eyes, we are on the brink of war with Cold War with China. And we also seem to be in the middle of a very tenuous situation in the Indian subcontinent with India and Pakistan in a very vulnerable place right now, where we are not sure exactly what's going to happen after the terror attack in Pahalgam. So there are a lot of changes that we are living through right now. What I want to address in this panel, and I'm really happy that I have a really distinguished, unusual panel here, of speakers that come with deep expertise in what's happening in global geopolitics, in venture capital, and in the regions that we are trying to connect. The reason I got involved with Israeli startups is probably 20 years ago, when Rajiv Motwani was doing some work there with some faculty there in Haifa. And we stumbled upon the fact that the Israeli startup ecosystem was extremely strong. And having been funded, like our DARPA folks here, having been funded by Israeli defense, they really had a running start on a few technologies that we had never seen before. So we got involved with that ecosystem a long time back. And last year, I figured it would be nice for me to try and connect some kind of a bridge between Israeli startups and Indian startups, since there was already so much back and forth. We began a program called Drishti, which is which actually works with the Embassy of Israel in Delhi, and we also work with the Israeli government in making sure that we have a center of excellence in India, and we've located it in Hyderabad at the T Hub, which is the startup incubator funded by the Andhra government, and they are helping we have about 10 startups. They are helping us find market access to these 10 companies, which are companies like drones and data processing, data communications, and AI. They are helping us get customers in India. And so that's where my own interest in Israel has been coming together in the last 1 year, specifically with these 10 startups. So today's program, or today's panel, is really about making sure we communicate two things to you. One is, of course, where are the new emerging opportunities arising as some of these regional powers come together? And the second is, what can you do? Because it's important to remember that each of us has a role to play in these new sort of geopolitical environments, whether we are mentoring a startup out of India or Israel, whether we are mentoring a startup out of, I actually have a startup out of Jerusalem. It's a Palestinian lady. And I'm very happy to say that she's doing gangbusters as an education startup. So there is a role that you need to play, and you need to recognize that in this shifting global geopolitics, each of us has a role to play in terms of, whether it's writing articles, whether it's writing a blog, whether it's working as a mentor, whether it's funding a startup or doing a startup yourself. So in that context, I'm going to begin by asking my panel to give a sort of a 30-second introduction about who they are. And I'm going to start with you, Vikram. You are our first panelist here from Washington, D.C. This is not something we all see here in the Valley regularly, right? They're sort of Washington, D.C. insiders. He used to be in the Department of Defense. And so, Vikram, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then if you can take 5 minutes to tell us about what are these IMEC and I2U2 initiatives that have been started by the U.S. and Indian governments, and what kind of opportunities do you think that's bringing out?
Well, First of all, thank you, Asha, and thank you, TiEcon, for organizing. And it's really a privilege and a pleasure to be here and see a lot of old friends and make some new friends. I'm a fish out of water in a way, except that I was born at Stanford Hospital and I went to school here and I went to Cal, and so I'm a Silicon Valley native, but who transplanted into the policy ecosystem of Washington 25 years ago, and have seen a lot of change, and really was excited to do this panel now because, you know, the headline news is a lot of chaos and concern: wars, tariffs, regulatory changes, what's going to happen with AI, where are we going what is the future, what are the next, how is the 21st century going to shape up? And people are pretty anxious. But I thought this panel was really interesting, Asha, because it brought together the three of the nodes in the global system that are actually going to be the most critical to, one, shaping our technology and innovation future, and everyone here is involved in that in some proactive way, and so there's a lot of lessons from that. But two, the challenges we're facing, I mean, largely US-China focused global competition and all of this instability, but a lot of it centers around questions of how technologies will be governed and how our lives will be shaped by technologies in the future. And the free democracies that are the most innovative historically working together are probably the best chance we have of having this future look the way we want it to look. And my background is currently I am the Senior Vice President of West Exec Advisors, and I advise the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum on defense, aerospace, and technology. West Exec, we advise probably about 50 companies, ranging from the biggest Fortune 50 down to tiny startups just up the road here. On doing business with US government, market entry globally, and we see a lot of the challenges and opportunities that a whole host of businesses are facing. All of them are living innovation every single day. And all of them are concerned about whether they're going to be in an environment in which they can thrive globally, not just in their own country, but globally. And I think for the first time in a long while, the policy world and the tech and innovation worlds are really intertwining in ways that we haven't seen. Mostly we've wanted to kind of ignore each other. You guys go do great innovation stuff, and the innovators are like, please stay away from me, Washington. You know, I don't want your help. But now we realize, one, we need governments to work together on things like supply chains and supply chain resilience. Two, we need governments to work together on how we're going to govern new technologies. Not just things like cybersecurity that we've been struggling with for a long time, but where artificial intelligence or down the road quantum is going to go, and how we're going to agree to work on those things together. And it's been interesting to see over the last few years, not just in this administration, one of the things of continuity between the last administration and this administration have been initiatives that look at bridging and finding synergies for the United States with its allies in Asia, primarily, think Japan, Australia, Korea, Taiwan, India. And then also a real focus on bridging from India over to Europe through a thing called IMEC, the India Middle East Economic Corridor, which started in the last administration but has been embraced in this current one, and through the I2U2, which was Israel, India, the United States, and the United Arab Emirates. And one of the things that's a truism of policy initiatives like these is they can be very impactful, or they can just be sort of symbolic talk. And the difference between impact and just being a piece of paper and something that's signed and announced and has conferences discussing it is actually what business and industry and investors do, and how the governments use these things to help facilitate and shape choices by investors, businesses, and entrepreneurs. I mean, so big industry and small innovators. And in this case, I think we're seeing a really unique moment. And India, Israel, and the United States, as pairs and as a triangle, are going to have a profound impact on what the innovation landscape looks like, and a profound impact on whether we have a stable and peaceful environment in which to function and thrive and grow. And so it's delightful to be here, and basically we have a couple of uniquely positioned folks on the stage with us that have done the investing and are able to talk about how we can all seize the opportunities that are coming even in this time of chaos.
So the other two on the panel, thank you, Vikram. The other two people on the panel are from the venture capital world. And given that we are all quite closely now watching what's happening in, at a policy level, what are the initiatives coming together, how might Saudi Arabian, let's say a sovereign fund be investing in XYZ venture fund, why are, the UAE government is taking really a strong position in saying, look, we want to be the hub where all things AI are happening. So given these three initiatives, which is IMEC, I2U2, and even ISET, which was started by Jake Sullivan in last government, ISET stands for Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. So these are all government-backed initiatives which could actually have real spending power if we can pull this off, if the governments can pull this off. So in that regard, let me take the next question to Manu Rekhi, who is our local venture capitalist here. And Manu has also been, running something called Inventors Ventures, which invests heavily in India, and I've been one of the LPs in that fund. Manu, I've known you for a long time. It looks like for the first time, this is opening unprecedented level of new kind of opportunities in not just civilian technology, but civilian technology with a tinge of defense in it. What are you seeing here? And how are you seeing collaborations emerging between US and India on these startups? And is there an urgency to that? And what do you think is going on there?
Thank you, Asha, and everybody on the panel. We have been investing in the India-US corridor for more than 20 plus years, and even before with our partners. So, these waves of opportunities keep coming. I think the reason why India does so well with software is because it doesn't require the regulation, and you can't stop the tariffs to be applied to that as well. So I think that will continue to happen. And the opportunities with China getting sidelined in some sense, I think there's a really good opportunity for India to sort of step up, right? And to sort of see the full benefit of this, I think allowing foreign capital to flow freely into India, right? Having patient capital that can have 7, 10, 20-year sort of horizons, whether you're investing that in infrastructure or startups, software companies, or with deep tech, or across the board, and defense included. So I think there's a huge renaissance that's about to happen between these two, and then I think Israel is a third leg to the stool to be able to sort of have this pieces going. So in my sort of vantage point, I think the best way to do this is for government to sort of step back, allow the entrepreneurs to sort of flourish. Maybe India can have 5 or 10 million entrepreneurs. And I think the best way to do this is to sort of allow for free flow of capital, get rid of the red tape, and let the magic sort of happen. So I think all these things are possible by letting entrepreneurs be unleashed.
And Nilesh, tell us a little bit about J Ventures, which I think invests mostly is sort of a bridge, right, between Israel and US. Yeah. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you, the panel. Just for introduction, J Ventures was actually created. The problems that you heard from Vikram about, what founders do and can. Manu also talked about entrepreneurs. So we actually took the free market approach and said, look, while the governments are going to do what the governments do, while the wars are going to do what the wars do, the founders are the bedrock of, an economy like Israel, for example. It's about 46% of Israel's GDP. So we kind of built a fund. We said, look, policies, politics, all of that aside, why don't we just focus on one thing that we knew best, which was, how do we help companies grow? How do we help fund founders, et cetera? So we kind of built J Ventures as a totally upside down model where we took close to 500 plus CXOs, other VCs, about 140 of, VCs from other funds, and kind of brought in as LPs in the fund. And the whole idea was to come in as what value can we bring to the founders. Because we believe innovation and founders are the bedrock of especially an economy like Israel, some of the things that Vikram, you just highlighted. And the way we are trying to solve these problems is by actually continuing to fund innovation with the free market, private market approach. And we want to let the founders kind of do what they do while they're fighting wars, which has happened in our case. We have several portfolio companies in Israel. And that's the path that we have chosen, which is to just enable entrepreneurs do what they do best, which is just go and build awesome companies.
So which brings me to this point of, with the recent, the sad tragedy that happened in India in Pahalgam, there is a lot of chatter in India about almost like a two-sided war with Pakistan perhaps being backed by China and stuff like that. Do you guys see defense technology collaborations, right? Whether it's on drones, whether it's in autonomous warfare, AI-powered data sharing, intelligence sharing. Are you seeing new things happening on the startup front? And the reason I'm asking this, and maybe Manu, you go first. The reason I'm asking this is because for the first time, I'm noticing that Washington, D.C., I must say to the credit of this current Trump administration, has reached out to Silicon Valley. I have never seen this before. They've reached out to the Valley in ways that has enabled us to go regularly to Washington, D.C. I don't know some of you, if you saw a forum yesterday for one whole day. It was being led by Jacob Hellberg, who is going to be the new Undersecretary for Interiors and Economics. It's called Hill and Valley Forum. Just check it out. I want you guys to look at some videos from the Hill and Valley Forum. It is unprecedented how Washington, D.C. has embraced the Silicon Valley and said, we need your help in strategic thinking. We need your help as we encounter China and as we look at China as a potential serious adversary for the next decade or so. And the Valley is more involved. I see venture capitalists in Washington, D.C. all the time. I see startups there all the time. Look at Anduril, the defense startup. But I don't know if it's a startup anymore. But look at Anduril. Look at Palantir. These guys are now, working closely with the government, hand in glove, on technologies that can bolster our strength and make sure that we are staying 2 steps ahead of China. So what are you seeing, given that there might be billions of dollars that might be getting unleashed from the government side, Manu, are you seeing as a venture capitalist, are you seeing more startups in that space which are sort of, dual use?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a few more. We haven't invested in any yet, but I think as there more capital starts flowing in from customers, right? Because at the end, you can't build a defense company or any startup if you don't have the customers, right? And I think in the past, if you build something, you go to the Indian government, they're like, well, go prove it somewhere else and then we'll buy it, right? And I think that is changing, and I think that will make a big difference. Just as an anecdote, about 11 years ago, I helped a startup that came through our incubator that we were doing. And I introduced them to somebody in the U.S. military, and they did a $100 million 10-year contract. And then it went to the Peruvian government, and then the Indian government actually bought them, even though the company was based out of Bangalore, right? And he tried very hard, tried to get into the Indian government, couldn't. So that round tripping sort of worked because an American general actually recommended it to his Indian counterparts, right? So I think that, hopefully is starting to change. I think when the money starts flowing, I think the entrepreneurs do respond to this. So this dual sort of piece. So, for example, if you have drone technology that can protect, power plants, but that can also, you can have iron domes, but more regular, over small installations. And that can be used by private industries, but also by government as well. For example, that's just one use case. And I think this is where there's a lot of collaboration with Israel, because those two countries actually have very similar sort of needs. So I think this will just happen. And to me, I'll go back to the original first principles here, is if you unleash and make it easier for more founders to actually get access and get capital and be able to do stuff, I think all these problems get solved, right? I think the government just has to be open to working with entrepreneurs.
Vikram, what is Indus X? And what kind of startups do you see hovering around there?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, and I'll talk a little bit about IndusX, and you mentioned one acronym, ISET, that's been turned into, the new acronym is TRUST.
Right.
So, but it's, transforming the relationship, technology, some, these long acronyms they like in government a lot. But that is, there's the dual use and the certain areas, space, cyber, surface and undersea technologies, artificial intelligence, some quantum, certainly some fundamental quantum science in India is very strong. There is a growing ecosystem, and in the Israeli space, we should also turn to that. National security technology is actually very very prominent. But what IndusX was is an effort to bring the U.S. and India together on defense technology. So specifically focused on joint challenges for technologies that are relevant to the defense space. And a lot of those are dual use. A lot of those are unmanned platforms or space systems that could be used for a whole host of things, including defense. I do think that with the Ukraine war, and to a degree with what you saw with Israel in Iran and with Israel in the war in Gaza, you are seeing a lot of focus on transforming warfare with unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, new sensor technologies, and this sort of arms race of, new innovation in attritable, small, low cost systems that could be sort of flooding the zone with capabilities to help see what's going on and things of that nature. And a lot of that's going to be very applicable to things like environmental monitoring, pipeline security, undersea cable security, which are all things that matter to all of us. I mean, those are areas where a risk to undersea cables is a risk to everybody's data flow and every business and every operation. Similarly, protecting power grids. We don't know why Spain and Portugal lost all their electricity for almost 24 hours, but they did. Those vulnerabilities, whether they're malicious or not, are things that are only increasing. And there's a lot of innovation happening in building resilience of our critical infrastructure and systems. So I see that as a big potential growth area. And one thing I'd like to turn back to everybody too is, I think we feel that India is, compare Israel to India. And Israel is the tiniest of countries, punching way above its weight, and India is a wealth of talent and capacity, and really feeling like it's still punching below its weight. And somehow the India and the Israel and the United States coming together can help remedy that and help India level up. Because if we're going to compete with China on the global stage, who's going to sell digital infrastructure to the developing world? It's going to be China or India. It's not really going to be Europe and the United States. And so we need to make that happen. And everybody in this room and everybody in Silicon Valley, from investors to entrepreneurs, can play a role in that.
Nilesh, given your focus on Israel, a lot of Israeli startups, I'm guessing are, they were inspired by focus on security, right? Because Israel sees itself surrounded by hostile forces and wants to make sure that it has a lot of its, in fact, a lot of, just like in the US, a lot of its Defense Department funding does go into these kind of dual-use technologies. What are you seeing in the last few years? What kind of changes are you seeing in the kind of focus of investment from venture side, from you guys? What are you guys looking at?
Yeah, look, I might be beating my own, drum here, but we've tried to stay ahead of the curve in many ways, whether it's investing before the war started. We've invested in companies which were sensing drones in 2018, 2019, and suddenly this company has like an $8 billion DoD contract. We have fortunate that we have an LP base that are actually, our CXOs and people who are operating on the ground. So we get to see a lot of these critical technologies even before they start maturing in the ecosystem. To answer a specific question, in fact, as a VC, we do our annual LP meetings. This year's annual LP meeting was actually about what we called as the theme was, tech resilience in Israel. What I mean by that is, when the war started, on October 7th, everybody knows what happened. happened, there was a lot of chatter that, oh my God, Israel is just going to go down, the country is going to go to, whatever. We actually didn't think so, not because we are just investors, in cross-border. By the way, we also invest in the US, so it's not just Israel. But we didn't really think so, number one. And we actually saw now, 20 months down, we actually have a lot of data on what actually happened in 2024. Sequoia, Greylock, Excel, Lightspeed, Insight, a bunch of these funds who are doing Israel investments, they actually doubled and tripled down. We did even before that. I was sharing some stats earlier that we actually ended up J Ventures as one of the most active foreign VC funds in Israel for the first half in 2024. And when we went out to our co-investors, we always knew that. Why? Specifically was we felt that the founders are just extremely resilient. In my whatever number of 25, 26 years of experience as a professional, these guys are just built different. It's about resilience. I've had portfolio companies where I've had founders who are actually fighting Hamas, on the ground, while they are on at night or day answering investor calls and sending us quarterly reports. So it's all about resilience. These founders just know what needs to get done. Nothing matters beyond just kind of making sure that their employees are taken care of. Many of them actually had 20-30% employees in reserve duties, meaning they are actually called to fight while they are writing code and talking to customers. So the keyword is resilience. The world hasn't seen nothing like it. We are very proud to be investing in founders that are just resilient. And I see a lot of them in our Indian founders here. And to Manu's point, at the end of the day, I think founders are going to found companies and they are going to go through the walls. That's what we believed as a venture fund. We just happen to do it in a geography where it has probably excavated to a whole different level.
But what we want is when you leave this room, we want you to be more aware and more awakened to the fact that you need to pay attention to what's going on on global tensions. Vikram, I want to ask you about potential. Is there a war kind of a situation arising between India and Pakistan? I keep hearing, I'm just seeing this on podcasts and social media and all that. People saying, there has to be a tit for tat and things like that. Is this real? Is it? What are you guys talking about in Washington, D.C.?
I think the expectation is that India will try to conduct some sort of reprisal if it can clearly establish a Pakistani state link to the attacks. It's clearly established a geographic link to the attacks by seeing that there were communications from Karachi and Lahore to the attackers that they don't know, at least they haven't shown proof to the embassies and ambassadors involved that they can show that there's a link to the Pakistani state. I think that does matter because that changes how the world views an action taken. The other thing I think for India is when they did conduct airstrikes into Pakistan, the unpredictability of escalation, which is something I think we do all need to pay attention to because it could be Taiwan, it could be there, it could be any number of places, but the unpredictability of escalation was on full display. An Indian fighter was shot down, an Indian pilot was captured. If there was not if an off-ramp wasn't found, which fortunately it was, the escalation risk would have been quite high, and of course, being nuclear armed states, it's of serious concern to everybody that it could go in a bad direction. And Pakistan has forward deployed tactical nuclear weapons, which is one of the only countries in the world that is a nuclear power that has done that. So that also means that there's a higher risk of escalation. I mean, I think the feeling in Washington is that there's a risk of perhaps justified response from India, but that could also bring an unfortunate and a level of uncertainty and a risk of escalation that people would like to avoid. But I think we're living in an era where a lot of what we want to see, and including from founders, is the technologies that can help bring down this kind of risk, right? And one of the ways you bring down this kind of risk is by providing good ISR, which is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, so that countries know what's happening and know what's coming and are less likely to miscalculate. And also good defense capabilities so that countries think twice about going across that line into military conflict. I do think we face some risk now.
I see, that the nature of warfare is so different now, in the sense that the other day I was talking to Eric Schmidt, our Google guy. It turns out they have set up a shop in Ukraine for drones, and they're actually manufacturing drones. Do you know anything about that, Vikram? And what is that?
I do. Actually, a lot of American companies and European companies and others have set up shop in Ukraine in partnership with Ukrainians on things like building drones, on some surveillance systems, on some sensors, and on munitions. Actually building small and medium caliber ammunition, all things that are going to be in massive need. And I actually think Ukraine is going to have a tech ecosystem come out of this war. Assuming there is a peace at some point, assuming Ukraine can keep functioning, I think we're going to see a little mini Tel Aviv or a little mini Bangalore emerging that might be heavily focused on that, with international partners maybe manufacturing for export with the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians manufacturing for themselves. Something that you could see in India too, manufacturing in India and for export to places like Southeast Asia or Africa or Central Asia or Eastern Europe that are not buying French or American systems, but might buy Chinese or Russian. And we want to compete with that. We don't want them buying the Chinese and Russian systems if we can help it.
Right. Before we open up to the audience, one last question for Manu. Manu, what is your level of optimism that the Indian government will not get in the way of interesting new opportunities that are arising in AI and in global defense and security collaborations? What is your sense about, how ready is the Indian government to recognize that we have China breathing down our, eastern side, we have Pakistan on the other side, and that we need to strike alliances that we have not done in the past, like with the US, for example? Do you have hope do you have optimism about the Indian sort of the bureaucracy reducing its regulatory barriers?
Well, that's a very loaded question, but so I'm not going to assume that I know what goes in the heads of bureaucrats and politicians, but I think I'm always optimistic, as most people in this room would be. So to me, the big part is, if you look at the fundamentals, India's per capita GDP is $3,000, right? Compare that to China's 12,000. Israel's at 30,000, and US is as close to 70,000, right? So I think a key part of Indian policy would be like, hey, how do I get more job creations, right? And I think this is an opportunity with what's happening with geopolitically with China, that there's a lot more opportunity for Indians to take advantage, right? So software industry, it's $200 billion, right? But that's the IT services, but $20 billion is SaaS software and AI and everything else. That has taken from 0 25 years ago to now, right? And that can go to $200 billion in 10 years. I think I'm far more optimistic, whereas the national survey sort of says that goes to $35 billion in 10 years. And I'm looking for a 10x improvement. And those things can actually float a lot of different pieces together, right? And that money, additional capital, can actually fund defense and everything else as well. And that's just the software side. If you look at the physical goods that get transferred from India, that's roughly $80 billion today. It used to be, in 25 years ago, $9 billion, right? And so that hasn't grown as fast, as roughly 9x growth. The software has grown by 24x, right? And so if you look at, if that can go from $80 billion to $200 billion, you start bridging the gap on what China is sort of losing behind with this trade sort of war. So I think there's a lot of optimism, and I think that lifts the average Indian's GDP per capita from $3,000, hopefully to $10,000 in the same time frame, maybe even $15,000. So I think if I was purposeful as the Indian government, I would focus on job creation, better jobs, focus on education, reskilling the Indian workforce to be able to take these higher paying jobs, manufacturing coming back to India. I don't think we need manufacturing back in the US, and none of people here would actually work on building an iPhone. I think you'd rather have this stuff go to places like India and have a better supply chain. So I think I'm pretty optimistic, and I think this gift that's been given, in some sense, this war with China, would actually only benefit India and Israel and the US. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we can open up the floor to the to audience questions here.
We can hear as well.
Thank you so much.
Except for this guy.
It's like homecoming. I've been an ambassador for India in several countries: Lebanon, New Zealand, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua. I was teaching global affairs at the OP Jindal University as an executive dean professor. Like Vikram, like you, I went to Bolt Hall, did my LLM here. I used to be a consul at the consulate, and I'm returning back to Silicon Valley. I'm going to be based here because my children are here. And my heart throbs with Silicon Valley. There's a lot of energy, a lot of creativity, and I want to be part of that system. So really, I relate very well to what you do. I also headed India's counterterrorism department. I was additional secretary for counterterrorism. I came to Washington when Nisha Biswal, Preet Bharara, General Todd, all these were there. They've come and met me also. So I've addressed the Global Counterterrorism Forum meetings on behalf of my minister several times. I'm now here in the Silicon Valley. I have 3 points to make. One is the business opportunity. Wonderful. India is fully open. I'm not competent to speak on behalf of the government because I'm now retired. It's a private capacity. But yes, one thing we do want, we would like to indigenize a little bit of the technology. We want to have a share in the pie. We don't want to let go of the control entirely to foreign entrepreneurs. We want to be in it. And we think we have the engineering expertise. That's point number one. Therefore, we always say there should be an indigenous component, all right, a domestic component. I don't think we should limit it to defense only. We should be more broad about it, all right? And we want to be part of the AI syndrome. And, we are looking at different language models, all right? Regarding Israel, we are sourcing a lot of sensitive, even our AWACS, avionics, and all that stuff, drones, etc. We're sourcing that from Israel, and we hold this partnership in very high regard. And I'm sure we'll keep doing that. But the professor in me, the academic in me, and the geopolitical scientist in me.
We should get to the question, sir.
Yeah, so the point is, one, we need technology to go hand in hand with public policy, the point which you were making. We should not let it go over to rogue machines and rogue countries. We should get the bigger democracies involved, including Europe, because they're also based on democracy. Number two, I think that we should also look at the global economic divide, which I was teaching. Too much of poverty, too much of deprivation is happening. More than 130 countries are not getting any benefit from the World Bank, the IMF, etc. So the corporate sector...
I think we should move to a question, otherwise...
No, this is a comment and adding to the debate, yeah. So the corporate sector needs to work with the governments and the social responsibility. The CSR projects need to be put into some of these countries, create economic opportunities, get better markets set up there, and they will buy your products. So it's a win-win situation. Yeah. So what is happening, that the geopolitical differences which are taking place in the globe today, I think that will get diluted. So we will have more cooperation, understanding, and global peace. I just wanted to add to the debate.
Thank you.
I'm not a technology guy. I'm a political scientist.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and sorry if I overtook.
No worries. No, thanks. So, one last question, and then I think the next.
Prakash here from Open Tech Technology Forum. My question to Nilesh specifically, because he's handling the Israel, and to my knowledge, I worked for Huawei, so I thought that Israel was a gateway to China. Now I am thinking, why not Israel? Why not Israel can be gateway to India? And in that respect, what do you think is required from the Silicon Valley side?
I mean, that's why we are here on this panel, because we think there's an opportunity there. Having said that, in terms of some critical technologies or defense technologies, those things, whatever at trade levels, the conversations that these governments need to have. As far as, Silicon Valley is concerned, like I said, as a venture investor, we take the free market approach. We want to go and fund the entrepreneurs wherever they see their market fit. If I have an Israeli entrepreneur, let's say on this company, on this drone sensing company that thinks that India is a big market for it, we are absolutely open for it. We do this, not just investing because the US is the only market. They go and sell it in Europe. So my answer to your question is very simple. We'll continue to back founders whatever market they see fit, including India. We've done some semiconductor deals as well, and they see India as a market as well. So I mean, I will always take a free market, private markets approach, and we'll go find entrepreneurs who see whatever market they see fit to execute their GTM on. Yeah.
And I would just really quickly add, although we've been so focused on defense, between the US, India, and Israel, it's going to be climate and environmental and energy technology, health, biotech. It's across the board where you see
it's everything
and opportunities.
It's cyber
agriculture,
Even
cyber
agriculture,
security.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Jay, and these questions may seem a little naive, but I'm going to ask them anyway. So, people think, the governments control the industry, but what about the other way around? If, it's great that these, entrepreneurial industries, especially today with all the AI and quantum computing, all these wonderful new frontiers, are going forward despite they're not getting held up because of the wars. But at the same time, if these industries are bringing in money to these countries that are war-torn, either by creating jobs or bringing in tax income to the governments, can they also influence the politics to promote peace? In my humble opinion, a lot of these wars could be solved with economic solutions. There's an expression, follow the money. For example, in Israel, Palestine, if Israel wanted to expand its borders, instead of just doing a land grab, they could offer to purchase, the Palestinians' homes and land. Same with Ukraine and Russia. From what I gathered, the root cause is actually the oil pipeline going into Europe. So, they could work out some deal for Russia to license, the pipeline going into Europe so that they don't need to engage in violent war. So is there some way for industry to influence politics and push for peace, with an economic solution? That's the first question.
I think just one question, actually. And Vikram, can you take that question? Okay. So that after that is the last question.
Yeah, I think it is after 5 o'clock, so we've well exceeded our extra time. We've gone about 15 more minutes over. But I think business needs stability overall for long-term success. So yes, there's money to be made in conflict. There's money to be made in national defense technologies and things like that. But the real money is made when you have peace and prosperity. So I think there is a way for industry to show the opportunities. The critical minerals deal that was signed with Ukraine now, there's a lot of cynicism around it, but that is a way to have the United States invested in Ukraine's future. That is a way to have Ukraine able to more quickly exploit those resources. That is a way to build supply chain resilience for free countries in the face of Chinese dominance of certain areas like critical minerals and solar panels and battery technology and pharmaceutical APIs for pharmaceuticals. I think what's happened though is we're in a new era of consciousness, right? COVID shook us on dependencies for things like PPE, and then looking at what China has done in terms of market dominance, in terms of using its unfair practices to try to drive other countries out of critical technology areas just by undercutting on price and volume. People have woken up to that, and absolutely, I think the cause of peace will be advanced by public-private cooperation in these technology areas to give more resilience and more space and more breathing space and reduce the need for hopefully reduce the need for conflict. So there's a role to play, for sure.
Yeah, the last question now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm of the view that in geopolitics, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only interests. And I strongly believe that politics has become the entertainment arm of the military-industrial complex. And while we are trying to counter China, we are adopting the same playbook of China which is of censorship, surveillance, and state force. So how do you, not become the tyrant you're fighting?
Good question. Who wants to take it, Manu or J Ventures? Nilesh.
I think this question is better done over a beer.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you to the panelists. This was incredible, very unusual for TiEcon. So, thank you again.